Hi everybody, Mr. Dorky here. We are here for Art for Kids Live and Adults too, number 8. I'm going to give everybody a second. Hi Giuliani, hello Devendorfs. Today I'm going to try something new today. I'm going to try a 2-part lesson. So today we're going to start. Today is just going to be all prep stuff. We're going to have a lot of fun, a lot of experimentation. Hi, Paul. And just create probably too much stuff that we might not need, but it's just going to be fun to play. Especially with it being Friday. It'll be a chance for everybody just to have a little fun. And yeah. So the artist we're going to be learning about is Clare Youngs. Again, like all my other videos, the day before, I post, hi LG, miss you LG, miss you Giuliani, a couple of my students. And so Clare Youngs, she was a graphic designer, but she went back and she does her own they're hard to describe, but they're just really cool. And like I was saying in the post before, I put her website, I put some pictures of her. Hi Katie, I put some images of her artwork there. She does these animal collages, and what collage is basically a collection of different cut papers. Hi Faith. I love seeing my students on here. I miss you guys. So what we're going to do today, in the style of Clare Youngs, she does a lot of just fun experimentation with different materials. And I have a ton of my materials. And given that we have some time, next week is our school's spring break. So I'll probably put in the comments some supplies, so you have plenty of time, and I'm going to make sure this video is right up. Well, I'm glad Jack is here, and Lane, maybe when she sees what we're doing, she'll get into it. But you'll have a week to get some stuff done, so if you need to order something, I can, as we're working with some supplies, if you guys see something, some of my supplies are more artist supplies, maybe not student quality. So if there's something you want to know an equivalent of, please let me know and I'll put it in the comments so you guys can get it. But I also have some cool things from around the house, like a meat tray, that we're going to use. So there's lots of different things that you can be doing for this. So we're going to just start with different treatments of paper, like Clare Youngs. And I have to make a shout out to the Devendorfs. Let's see if the light will adjust. In this, crazy time, I had a little package, and I was like, I didn't order anything. And it says, I draw, what's your superpower? And I got that from the Devendorfs. So big thank you from the Devendorfs for my lovely little mug. I had to have my morning coffee in it. And we're going to do this to try and not disrupt. And of course, it's wrapped around the... All right, there we go. A little less bright. All right, so there's my little mug. I draw, what's your superpower? All right, so let's get started. So Clare Youngs works with different animals. And I want you to sort of think or narrow down an animal to one or two of your maybe favorite animals. Based on my colors. Does anybody have any idea of what animal for the adults I may have binge watched? And if you saw some of my recent artwork, you have an idea of where I'm going with this. But based on the colors, if you have colored paper, if you have just plain white paper, I have some oranges, some black, some darker yellows, some whites, some grays, just a lot of different options, because like I said, we're going to be making probably too much. Yes! I'm going to do a tiger. We're doing a tiger. So, couple easy things that we can start off with. If you have just your drawing supplies, whether that be, and I'm actually going to show you guys a couple other options too. I've been only using my markers, but with our end goal today is going to be creating lots of textures, and again, texture is how something feels or it looks like it feels, as well as pattern. Okay, different patterns. So we're going to be combining those two with all different materials. So I'm very simply just going to start off, and I'll start with maybe a material I haven't used yet or shown you guys how to use. I have colored pencils. I use a brand called Prismacolor. And I don't, these are professional grade. This set costs, I think, like $30. It's a 36 pack. They do sell student versions of these. It's like, I think it's called like Prismacolor Select or something like that, and they're just a little bit more affordable. But the cool thing is they have lots and lots. They have 3 different trays of colors. So just to get started, I'm just going to create maybe some fur. Now, with colored pencil, we haven't really used colored pencils yet. Let me see if I can get us a little bit closer. There we go. With colored pencils, a lot of times we have the tendency just to use them like this, which is okay if you're doing like fur, which is a texture I might leave, but without pressing so hard that you break your pencil, you can just apply a little bit more pressure. And colored pencils actually have a little bit of a wax in them. And when you get that sort of waxy finish, I'm not pushing so hard that I'm breaking my pencil tip, but I'm adding a little more pressure so that some of that wax comes down. The harder the pressure, the darker the color is going to be. So already you can see the difference between my very light pressure and my dark pressure. It's going to make it much more visible from afar if you have this hanging in a frame at home, or if it's on the fridge or wherever you guys hang your artwork at home. And depending on what animal you choose, think about, does it have scales? You know, I'll do a little bit of a scale. So my scales are going to be green, and they're kind of scalloped, like little C's. And then I can put my green And again, making that, pushing a little bit harder. The fancy term is called burnishing. It just means getting that waxiness. But I'll show you the difference between one that's burnished so this one versus this one. You can see it just looks a little more finished, a little darker. So whatever you're deciding for your patterns, and if you guys have some questions for patterns or you need help with them or whatever, please, please, please put in the comments. I'm trying to watch on the side. So if you need some guidance as I'm using these different materials, go for it. And you know, if you're doing a pattern like I'm doing, you know, some fur, maybe I mix in some browns with my blacks. And I'm going to do it on maybe another color of paper too, because I'm not really right now thinking of my end goal. I'm just, today is literally just have as much fun creating textures, patterns. Maybe I'll get some orange. And supplies, I have my handy dandy pencil sharpener. Depending on what kind of pencil sharpeners you have at home, little known fact or little factoid for you. Colored pencils actually gunk up because of the kind of waxy stuff I'm talking about. Colored pencils can actually clog your pencil sharpener. So if you have a pencil sharpener at home, make sure you're using a hand one for colored pencils. So here on colored paper, I'm doing some orange on top of my yellow. Maybe I'll leave some of the yellow paper to show through. Maybe I'll put some brown. But these papers are eventually going to be cut up. So really have some fun with this and experiment. Maybe I'm going to do a little orange on here too, just to throw it in. But that's colored pencils. They're pretty self-explanatory. And again, if you have any recommendations for, or you want recommendations for if you don't have colored pencils at home, and again, I'm using a certain kind. If you have just general colored pencils at home, whatever brand, it doesn't matter. But just wanted to give you guys some options. So there's just a couple fur textures. Okay. I'll just do some stripes now too, some simple stripes. Maybe, so I have kind of a fur texture now. I'm just gonna go more to make kind of like the tiger stripe. So I'm just gonna use my markers to kind of make my stripe. And again, does not matter if you use, I use these fancy Bianos. They're like $40 for like 72 different markers. But they're Illustrator grade, so not every kid might need that fancy of a set. But you can get Crayola as a great student brand. You can get them right on Amazon. There's also a supplier that I use called School Specialty and Dick Bleck. They're for educational. they are a warehouse, and sometimes they have cheaper prices. So feel free to check out Dick Blick or School Specialty. So here I have another little piece of tiger stripe. And I'm just gonna literally keep a pile of all of my papers on the side. Let's look at some other supplies too. I'm actually gonna go to paint so that some of it has time to dry. Some of you might have been like, what is he doing with a meat tray? This is a really easy way to do some very simple block printing with something you have around the house. With the help of adult or for older kids, wash the meat tray first. I already washed and sanitized it. But you can take a meat tray that's basically styrofoam, and you can do this with a styrofoam plate. You can do it with, you know, anything, but now I have a little block. Okay, I can use the tip of my pencil, and all I'm going to do is push in to, and I'm going to use the other end to make a thick line. All I'm doing is pushing in and I'm making a little stripe. And you can find, my pencil looks a little dense, but you can use the tip of a pen. You basically just want to make sure that the foam goes down. Basically what you're creating is a fancy rubber stamp. I have a series of works that I've done that have, this is like fancy linoleum that you need a knife and stuff to cut. But basically all you're doing is you're creating, and you can see how it's indented. When we go to actually paint it, the paint is not going to go wherever you push down. So, and this requires paint, or I'll show you another little trick too with this. You don't have to have paint with this. The cool thing is if you have a washable marker will stay on the surface of this long enough for you to print it. And I'm going to do a couple different types of textures on here. I'm just trying to find the fastest way. Using a pen cap. To push down. I could also just use it to make fur texture. Or if I want to do scales. Oh, bye, LG. The YouTube. So if you can't stay, make sure you hop on to YouTube. These videos are always on YouTube. Same day, a little bit later in the day. It just takes a couple hours to edit the video and then get it uploaded. But at Jason Dorphy on YouTube. Especially if you're going to be joining us for our next video, you'll need to have some papers prepared. So hop over to Jason Dorphy on YouTube. So you can see how I have some scale texture, I have some stripes, and then I just have some very simple fur. So here's how we work with this. You can, using a marker, this is the simplest way. You can marker up and then press. This is an alcohol-based marker, so it kind of dries rather fast. Let me do it with a darker color so you guys can maybe see it. And make sure there's a lot of so there you can see just how quickly you can. And if it's not, you know, I might do a couple, because the cool thing about Clare Young's artwork is not all the textures are super pronounced. So there I have some very simple with different varying levels of darkness, which is very cool. I have some just plain acrylic paint. Any acrylic paint will do, especially I'm thinking most families might have, you know, bottles of, you know, maybe craft paint from like Walmart or wherever. Give it a shake and make sure it's still good. That one's not good, so I'm going to use a little bit of this one. All you need is a brush, and then you're just going to put paint on. I'm using a copper colored paint. I am not quite sure if this is going to show up because it's a little watery. The darker the color, the better. Oh, it kind of showed up. And you can see where the scales were. Here's my stripes where I carved away, and I just touch it with my paintbrush. Here's where I pushed down for my stripes. Wherever you do that, let's see if I can do it backwards. You can see where this darn glare. So that's a very fun way. Let me see if I can get some darker color so you guys can see it a little better. So I'm just going to use a little bit of, and you want a very, very thin coat for this. If it's too thick, like I just did with that side, you know what? I'm going to show you guys what it looks like when it's too thick. If it's too thick, it's just going to clog up. So I have one side that has a good amount of paint, and this side has too much paint. So you guys can see the difference between the two. So here's where you can see that I carved out and pushed down the styrofoam to make those stripes. And you can see the scales that I created. Here's the side that I did the fur, but there's just too much paint on there. So I still might keep this though. So that's the fun part about this. We're not throwing anything out. Even if you think it might be a mistake, keep it, because you don't know what you might need for the final project. This, depending on if you have extra or whatever, you can just toss it out. I'm going to toss it out because I have plenty. Luckily, I just went to the grocery store yesterday. My basement freezer was emptying out, so I had to restock it up. Let's do some other materials. You know, if I'm doing a tiger, it can be a cut paper again. So I can take a piece of paper and I can cut and glue that on top of a lighter color. And maybe I do cut paper, and then maybe I do a little bit of marker. And maybe I combine a little bit of marker with a little bit of pen. The fun part about Clare Young's work is her not only varying textures but varying materials. And that's why I'm trying to show as many things as I can for you today. So if you have things at home, you know, even house paint. Obviously house paint not as washable, so you know, if you're with a child, please make sure you're supervising and helping them. But I don't want people to be running out to the store and trying to grab stuff if there's even stuff open. But again, if people have some questions or supplies they want some ideas for, another supply I'll show you guys how to use. These are so very expensive ones. I got these, but these are oil pastels. There's some really nice Crayola ones. These are like the texture of them, the best way I describe them to my students before they use them is it's like using lipstick, which sounds so weird, but they're super soft and super blendable. And again, the harder the pressure, you don't really need to press even barely at all before it gets that darker color. And the fun part is that these are so light and soft like a lipstick that I don't have any. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to use my finger. These actually blend really nicely together. So I'm going to just make some. Everybody's so quiet today in the comments too. Does nobody have any textures they're stuck on maybe, or need some ideas? So this might be my fur, and I'm going to use my extra paper just because who knows, I might use that little swab later. And the fun part furthermore is I can take my crayon and go on top and add some fur. Now, amongst all of this, I'm still going to want certain parts of my tiger to be able to use. So I'm still going to want to have eyes and a nose. So I have a lot of textures so far. Different textures, different patterns that I can use. But I still want to use have an eye to make. And an eye, I'm going to use, I'm going to show you how to use, I'll do both eyes with two different things. Um, these are basically watercolor sticks, watercolor pencils. Um, I'll use some watercolors, so if you have watercolors lying around, I'll show you how to use those too. But like I said, these are just little watercolor crayons, and they're brand new, so I don't know how I'm going to get them out. Of course, the one color I want is stuck in there. There we go. So with watercolor pencils or watercolor crayons, you just draw with the material, the crayon, the colored pencil, whatever. So I'm going to do my tiger eye. And I'm going to leave some areas white. I'm actually going to put a little bit of yellow because you'll see what happens when I actually go to add the water. Basically what these are is a compact version of like what you typically think of like a watercolor palette set. It's just in a different form. So what I'll do is just get a wet brush and I'll come in, and now that paint or that crayon becomes paint, and it very quickly becomes much darker and bolder, so you don't need to use as much of a watercolor pencil. So just look how one brush stroke does that. So I'm getting my tiger eye. And watercolor paints come in all different shapes, sizes, brands, types. Watercolor pencils are great for kids. They have a little bit more control. We normally think of a typical watercolor paint maybe in a palette with like the 8 basic colors, you know, in a row. They also come in little tubes like this. I'll just use a little bit of this so you guys can see. This, you just get wet and it goes all over my paper. A little bit goes a long way. So that is watercolor. And again, I'm using watercolor crayons. You can use watercolor pencils. I'm going to do just a quick. If you don't have colored paper, a real easy way to get colored paper, if you have watercolors, is to just get a big area of color down, and you can very quickly, now you have colored paper. We just let this dry, and the nice thing about watercolor is any material that you try to use will go on top. So now that I have it watercolored, once I let this dry, I can then go back on top with and I want to let this dry. This is a little bit more dry, but I can Sharpie on top of it. Or I could do a little bit more paint or acrylic paint or colored pencil. Colored pencil's still out. Let me show you. So I can colored pencil on top of that watercolor. So the fun thing is that if you have a lot of these supplies, you can use different materials interchangeably. So far we've done some just ballpoint pens, some Sharpies, some darker marker. We've learned how to use just a old meat tray, a clean meat tray though, to make prints and stamps with some acrylic paint, or just using your just a regular marker on top of the meat tray, using some colored pencil, just some marker, and we just went over to make, just because we're doing the pieces parts now, we still want to make sure we have all the parts to the animal, so we want to make sure we have things like eyes and a nose. This was also, forgot to say, we just cut paper. So Jennersons, today we're just doing prep for the animals. So if you're just joining us, today is kind of a play with materials day. We're gonna create all sorts of different textures on different papers. I'm doing a tiger next time, so I'm making sure I have 2 eyes. I have tiger stripes on different colors. I'm using colored pencils, markers, crayons, stamping. I'm creating all of this so that for our next project, or our next class rather, we can cut it out and make a collage. What a collage is basically, like if this is my paper, a collage is just combining all of my parts as a new piece of art. So we'll be, next class, taking all of our things that we have made today, cutting them up and reassembling them as a final project. Fun thing about black paper too is all of our white materials will show up on the black. And Jennersons, if I've been saying too, if you need some ideas, the next class, because we're on spring break next week, so you'll have some time to do this. So if you maybe don't have and I'll show again the meat printing tray. If you need some materials, you can comment and we can get you some suggestions. But here's just some watercolor on black paper. So the white obviously shows up. I'm gonna do a little eyeball. And after this, I'll show the meat tray trick again, which the meat tray trick, you can use a meat tray, you could use a styrofoam plate, you can use a lot of different materials. You can even dip tissues. I'm actually going to get some tissues so you guys can see some of that just texture. It's a very easy way to make a quick texture with some paint. So here's an eye. So my meat tray trick, I threw my other piece out, so I'm going to cut another little piece. And again, before you use this, make sure you have it washed and cleaned. And so you have a piece of styrofoam. Again, it could be, I choose a meat tray because it's got a little bit thicker texture, but you can use anything. You could use styrofoam plate, you know, yeah, those are the, I don't know why I'm struggling, but meat trays work, paper plates, anything that's press-inable. So I'm using just the tip of a pen, and I'm using the pen this time so you can see. I'm pushing down and creating an indent into my styrofoam. So there's, you can see it's all kind of dug up. So now what I'm going to do is using a marker or paint or whatever you have around, I'm just going to get that nice and colored, and then I just press down, and now I have a texture. I'll do the same thing with paint so that you guys can see what that looks like with paint. Press it down. That's a little bit more obvious, so you can see the different texture with the paint, with the meat tray. And I think that actually, you know, again, it could be ballpoint pen, could be just plain pencil. So here I'm just doing some fur, maybe I'm doing some stripes. Let me quickly see what other art supplies I can show. That is pretty much all I have in terms of supplies. I was kind of hoping we might have some more people comment and let me know if they need some help. If you don't have a meat tray, styrofoam plate, you know, the bottom of a coffee, styrofoam coffee cup. It's basically, it doesn't have to be a meat tray. It's just the styrofoam. So if you cut out the bottom of a styrofoam cup, if you have a styrofoam plate, or you know, anything that you can press into, cardboard could work. That's a good. So here's an easy way. So I have a piece of cardboard. And my work area is a mess now. So I have a piece of cardboard. This will take an extra step, but it will still work. Here's my scissors. So if I have a piece of cardboard, you're doing the same concept. You're creating an area that is higher and an area that is lower. So if I have a piece of cardboard, I'm going to just make a little one. So I have a piece of cardboard and I have a piece, my texture or my shape that I want to print off of. This step, or this with cardboard, you have to use paint. The styrofoam keeps the surface, it's not porous, so marker won't stick to it, but if I marker this, it would just color this. So I have, let me just see. I have a piece of cardboard that's glued on top of another piece of cardboard, and this is just, this is like a piece of cereal board or a cardboard box, like a packaging. But you can see how it's just slightly raised. And then all I would do is paint. If I get a little paint on the bottom part, that's okay. Because it's raised, so that's the only part that's going to show up. I never have this many supplies in my studio area, so I'm bumbling around. So I'm painting. So there's my cardboard, and obviously some of the paint went off of the initial area, but the same concept, I just press down, and the only area that's going to be making contact is going to be the area that is raised. So now I have a textured stripe. Okay. So using cardboard, using a meat tray, styrofoam cup, cutting up a cardboard box and making, little polka dots or something. I very easily could, I'm using a lot of tiger ideas, but if you're doing other, I could cut up a bunch of little circles, add circles on it, and that way you have lots of different ideas for textures. So the end goal for next class is to be able to have all sorts of different kinds of textures for you to work with. So I'm making a tiger. I have a couple tiger's eyes. I'm going to do a quick little nose with some paint, since the paint is right here, just acrylic paint. I'm going to make a little tiger nose. If you have any questions or ideas and you're not sure if they'll work, please feel free to comment on the video. Please feel free to send me a message at Mr. Dorothy's Art Room ES3 on Instagram, or message or comment on the YouTube video if that's where you're watching. Just make sure to tag me so I see it. And I'd be more than happy to help you. This is my first attempt at a 2-part video. We'll see how this goes. I'm hopeful that our next class is... Nope, Jennison's, you do not have to make a tiger. Any animal you want. Like I was showing some examples. I was doing some scales. So if you wanted to do a dinosaur or a dragon or a snake, I just started doing a tiger, just because there was lots of variety. But check out the previous posts that I made. It has some different examples of her work. She makes all sorts of different animals, but it's all about texture, how something feels or how it looks like it feels, and patterns. So I chose a tiger because he has lots of fur and lots of easy patterns to make. And whatever materials you have, if you only have colored pencils, just try using, different papers. And papers can be cardboard. It can be the back of a cereal box. It can be a piece of newspaper or whatever. Really get inventive. Use things around the house. Go through your recycling bin. See what you can find in the recycling bin. Maybe you do some paint on a piece of magazine, or maybe you cut up magazines and maybe you don't have colored paper. Like I use some black and gray colored paper, but maybe I cut out some newspaper and put it on a piece of white paper. There's lots and lots of options. I wanted to show you as many supplies today as possible, so depending on what you have around the house, just something for you guys to be able to try and experiment with over the next week or so. So again, if you have comments, if you have questions, please comment on this video. Please feel free to send me a message on Facebook, on Instagram at Mr. Dorothy's Art Room ES3. Feel free to follow that as well for updates about when the next class is going to be. But you guys have some time to be able to do this. Our next video is not going to be for another week. So that's why I wanted to try this 2-part class, so that if you needed time to be able to complete these parts, you had some time. So with that, I will see you guys next time with all of your shapes, patterns, textures, of your animal of choice. And thank you for watching. Subscribe to @JasonDorphy on YouTube. Like and share this video. And find me on Instagram at Mr. Dorothy's Art Room ES3 or at Jason Dorphy or at Dorphy Inc. for more posts about when these things are going to be happening. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everybody.